Hello, welcome to the Managing Anxiety webinar. My name is Dr Omar Kowlessar and I'm a clinical psychologist. I'll be guiding you through this webinar, which will last approximately 16 minutes. I hope you find it useful. Over the course of this webinar, we will be covering the following areas. To recognise how the coronavirus can increase the feelings of worry and anxiety in us all. To explore why we might experience these feelings. To review a variety of strategies to help manage anxiety. And finally, to understand where you can go for additional support. The coronavirus outbreak means that life has changed for all of us. Our world is changing rapidly at the moment, and given some of the news coverage, it would be hard not to worry about what it means for yourself and for those around you. Worry and anxiety are common problems at the best of times, and when it takes over, it can become all-encompassing. When facing a crisis of any sort, worry and anxiety are inevitable. They are normal, natural responses to challenging situations which are perceived as dangerous and uncertain. It's all too easy to get caught up in worrying about what could happen and the what-if scenarios which are out of our control. And while it's completely understandable for us to experience such thoughts, it's not useful or helpful to get overly caught up in them. Let's begin by exploring the process of worry in more detail. Human beings have the amazing ability to think about future events. Thinking ahead means that we can anticipate obstacles and problems, and gives us the opportunity to plan solutions. When it helps us to achieve our goals, thinking ahead can be helpful. For example, hand washing and social distancing are helpful things that we can decide to do in order to prevent the spread of the virus. Worrying, however, is a way of thinking ahead that often leaves us feeling anxious or apprehensive. When we worry excessively, we often think about worst-case scenarios and feel that we won't be able to cope. It can feel like a chain of thoughts and images which can progress in increasingly catastrophic and unlikely directions. Some people experience worry as uncontrollable. It seems to take on a life of its own. It is natural that many of us may have recently noticed ourselves thinking about worst-case scenarios. I'm going to run through an example of how thoughts can quickly escalate into worries from something relatively minor. As we go through the example, notice if you've experienced something similar. Let's have a look. So you wake up one morning and you're feeling unwell with a headache. You think to yourself, what if it's coronavirus? You go on to thinking, maybe I've passed it on to everyone at work yesterday, or everyone in the house. You think everyone I've been around is going to have got it and passed it on to other people. You now start to worry about the what-if scenario, which is losing everyone you know and love. You can clearly see how anxious-related thoughts have a tendency to escalate rapidly. Now, worry and anxiety aren't just in our heads, we feel it in our bodies too. The physical symptoms of anxiety include, but are not limited to, muscle tension, aches and pains, restlessness and difficulties relaxing, difficulty concentrating due to having racing thoughts, difficulties in sleeping, experiencing a racing heart, difficulty breathing, feeling hot and sweaty, and feelings of nausea. Anything can be a trigger for anxiety. Even when things go right, you might manage to think about yourself messing things up or worrying about if things start falling apart. There are particular situations where anxiety becomes even more common though. Let's look at some situations which tend to trigger anxiety. Situations which are ambiguous or open to different interpretations. Novel and new situations which we do not have prior experiences to fall back on. And unpredictable situations where the outcome is uncertain. Does any of this sound familiar at the moment? The current global health situation ticks all of these boxes, and so it makes sense that people are experiencing a lot of anxiety at the moment. It's an unusual situation with much uncertainty, which can naturally lead us to worry and feel anxious. As noted earlier, worry can be both helpful and unhelpful, and psychologists often distinguish between worries concerning real problems versus worries which are hypothetical in nature. Real problems are issues within your control and can be helped and even addressed with appropriate solutions. For example, given the very real concern about the virus at the moment, there are helpful solutions which include regular hand washing, social distancing, and physical isolation if you have symptoms. On the other hand, worries about hypothetical problems are out of our control and might include thinking about worst-case scenarios. For example, imagining yourself or people you know contracting the virus and dying. The point is, everyone worries to some degree, and some thinking ahead can help us plan and cope. There is no right amount of worry. We say that worry becomes an issue when it gets in the way of you living the life that you want to live, and if it leaves you feeling demoralized and exhausted. The single most useful thing anyone can do in any type of crisis, corona-related or otherwise, is to focus on what's in their control. You can't control what happens in the future. You can't control coronavirus itself or the world economy, but you can control what you do here and now. Because being in the here and now allows you to respond effectively and wisely to the current situation. This can make a huge difference to your well-being and the well-being of others around you. The reality is, we all have far more control over our behaviour or actions than we do over our thoughts and feelings. So our number one aim is to take control of our behaviour to respond effectively to this crisis. This involves both dealing with our inner world, our thoughts and feelings, and our outer world, social restrictions, and the people around us. How do we do this? Well, during a storm, the boats in the harbour drop the anchor, because if they don't, they'll get swept out to sea, and of course, dropping an anchor doesn't seem to make the storm go away, but it can hold the boat steady in the harbour until the storm passes on its own good time. Similarly, in an ongoing crisis, we're all going to experience emotional storms, unhelpful thoughts in our head, and uncomfortable feelings whirling around our body. And if we're swept away by that storm inside us, our ability to take effective action is reduced. So the first practical step is to drop the anchor, acknowledge our thoughts and feelings, and try to identify whether this worry and anxiety is a real problem or a hypothetical one before deciding on the best course of action. To help us do this, we can use something called a worry tree. This is a useful tool for helping you to decide what type of worry yours is. If you're experiencing lots of hypothetical worry, then it's important to remind yourself that you're focusing on something that you cannot solve right now, and then to find ways to let go of the worry and focus on something else. You might find this tool useful for children who are struggling to cope. With the current health situation, many of our normal routines and daily activities are changing. Naturally, this can be unsettling, and we can find that the things that we usually did to look after our well-being have become difficult. Whether you're working from home or in some form of physical isolation or distancing, it can be helpful to organise a daily routine that involves a balance between different types of activity. The activities we engage in can be broadly broken down into these three areas. Achievement. We feel good when we've achieved or accomplished something, so it's helpful to include activities each day that give us a sense of achievement. For example, doing some housework, decorating, gardening, a work task, cooking a new recipe for example, completing an exercise routine, or completing life admin such as paying a bill. Connected. We are social animals after all, so we need and naturally crave closeness and connection with other people. With the current health crisis, this is not as easy to do as it once was, so it's important that we consider creative ways to connect with others to avoid becoming socially isolated and lonely. Ways you can continue to connect with your family and friends include the use of social media, online gaming, phone and video calls, and creating online social groups such as book or film clubs. You can also explore local online neighbourhood groups to see if there's other ways to get involved with helping your local community. Pleasure. When we are struggling with anxiety and worry, we can lose touch with the things that we used to find pleasurable. Plan to do some activities each day that are pleasurable and make you feel joyful. For example, reading a good book, watching a comedy, dancing or singing to your favourite songs, exercise, taking a relaxing bath, or preparing and eating a nice meal. An imbalance of pleasure and achievement and closeness can affect our mood. For example, if you spend most of your time working with no time for pleasure or socialising, then you may start to feel low in mood and isolated. Conversely, if you spend most of your time or all of your time engaging in pleasurable activities and neglect other activities like housework and paying bills, this can lead to stress and anxiety. Now let's look at the type of activities which we can do to keep ourselves meaningfully engaged and occupied. Remember that we're social animals. We need connections to thrive and flourish. So I'd recommend trying to do an activity once a week which involves some form of social interaction with others. This is an example of an activity menu. Let's go through each one in turn. Animals. This could be petting an animal, walking the dog, or just listening to the birds. Create. Why not draw a picture, take a photograph, doodle, or make a photograph album? Be kind. Help a friend, do someone a favour, plan a surprise for someone, or make a list of things or people that you're grateful for. Connect with people. Connect with an old friend, join a new group, or join a dating site. Mend. Repair something in the house, make something new or decorate a room. Nature. Try some gardening, plant something, or just sit in the sun. Watch. This needs no explanation, but why not try something a bit different? Try new things. This could be trying new food, listening to new music, or just doing something spontaneous. We can spend so much time and effort caring for others that we can sometimes forget to be kind to ourselves. Worry can come from a place of caring. We worry about others we care about. A traditional psychological therapy technique for dealing with unhelpful thoughts is to write them down and consider alternative perspectives. Try to respond to yourself with the same compassion you would offer a close friend or family member. Try to adopt a kind, open and non-judgmental approach to what you're experiencing right now. Ask yourself, what would my best friend say to me? What would I say to someone I cared about who was experiencing the same thing? How would I speak to them? What tone of voice would I use? Once you have a sense of what this would look like, try putting it into practice. Sometimes you might find that things are getting on top of you and that you need a way of getting untangled from your thoughts and feelings. Techniques which help you get out of your head and make contact with the present moment are really effective at helping you to do this. As best as you can, focus your full attention on the activity you are doing, whatever you are doing, engaging your senses where possible. Here are some examples which can be used anywhere. Look around the room and notice 5 things you can see. Notice 3 or 4 things you can hear. When eating a meal, notice what you can smell, taste and see about your food. Try slowing the act of eating down and notice how this feels from how you normally use. Take a moment, close your eyes and focus on your breath and the sensations of breathing for a few minutes. Every time you get distracted, simply bring your attention back to the breath. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this webinar useful. For further advice and support, please get in touch with your local GP practice. Take care.